I've been revising the doctrine of mistake, and I'm struck by how narrow it actually is. People assume any misunderstanding voids a contract, but the courts are far less generous.
Absolutely. The law is quite reluctant to let parties escape a bad bargain. Only certain types of mistake will affect the validity of a contract, mainly common mistake, mutual mistake, and unilateral mistake.
Let's start with common mistake. That's where both parties share the same mistaken assumption, right?
Yes, but the threshold is extremely high. The mistake must render the subject matter of the contract essentially different from what the parties believed it to be. Bell versus Lever Bros is the classic authority. Mere mistakes as to quality aren't enough.
Unless you're dealing with something like Couturier versus Hasty, where the goods had already perished before the contract was formed.
Exactly. In that case, the subject matter didn't exist at all, so the contract was void. But modern courts are cautious. The Great Peace really tightened the doctrine and rejected any broader equitable version of common mistake.
What about mutual mistake? That always feels slightly theoretical to me.
It's rare, but it exists. That's where the parties are at cross purposes, each meaning something different, and there's no objective way to resolve the ambiguity. The classic example is Raffles versus Wichita House, the two ships named Peerless.
If one interpretation is objectively clearer, the courts usually uphold the contract based on that interpretation.
Right, the objective approach saves most agreements. True mutual mistake only arises where ambiguity is genuinely irresolvable.
Unilateral mistake seems more practically important, especially in commercial cases.
I agree, that's where one party is mistaken and the other knows or ought to know of the mistake. Hardock versus Colin Shields is a good illustration. The buyer snapped off an offer that was obviously a pricing error.
And the court refused to enforce it because the buyer couldn't rely on a mistake he clearly recognized.
Exactly. There's also unilateral mistake as to identity, though that area is notoriously messy, distinguishing between face-to-face contracts and distance contracts, and deciding whether identity or creditworthiness was crucial.
Cases like Cundy versus Lindsay and Phillips versus Brooks still give students headaches.
And rightly so, the policy tension is obvious, protecting innocent parties versus maintaining certainty in commercial transactions.
So overall, the doctrine of mistake is less about fairness and more about preserving contractual certainty.
That's the key takeaway. The courts intervene only when the mistake undermines the very basis of the agreement, not just because one party made a poor or unfortunate decision.